Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to another episode of Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, my guest is Robert Blake. Robert, you want to give everyone a bit of a background or an intro to yourself?
Sure. Thanks for hosting me on another one of your great shows. And I'm happy to be a part and maybe shed some light on investing in the United States or using US dollars to be more exact. My background, I guess since 2000, I've been a real estate investor full-time and primarily in Canada. That's where I live, just outside of Toronto. And but probably in around 2011, 2010, I started doing some strategic acquisitions outside of Canada in a sunny tropic place called the Turks and Caicos. So I guess that's the reason why we're here today.
Yeah.
In addition, I'm a licensed, I guess if you want to call it a private equity or dealing representative, that's sort of my passion. Everything I do and invest is with my own dollars, and I like to be close to it, whether I own private real estate in around the GTA or Turks, or if I'm investing in other larger scale projects, which are beyond my scope, like a REIT.
Yeah.
That's why I got licensed in as a dealing representative, so I can speak to the CEOs and managing partners and keep close to my money. So that's a little bit about myself. I'm I guess a professional engineer by trade, a chemical engineer, and I abandoned that in around 2000 and kind of switched into real estate. So
Cool. So for the lending sort of thing, you just work with your own money. You don't like because I know there's some people who do that, have a similar license, and I believe they like basically work to help facilitate like private money exchanges and stuff like that. Is that kind of what, am I on the right path?
Yeah. So I'm registered in Quebec and in Ontario with the Ontario Securities Exchange, and pretty much, I mean, where the space, where I use the space mostly is with registered funds. So TFSA and RRSPs.
Yeah.
And clients that, including myself, I had lousy returns when the banks managed my money. So that's why I went into self-directed through Olympia Trust and took control of my money, and not only private lending, peer-to-peer, which, mortgages from one lender to another. I found the private equity space under Olympia Trust as well, and investing in REITs and car washes, and so I do utilize both of those facilities under Olympia Trust, and for a good 10 plus years, so I'm quite familiar with that space.
That's great. Okay, so yeah, maybe we'll get back to the meat and potatoes. So you, I always get interested in what everyone's doing. It's very interesting. Turks and Caicos, like especially this time of year, like we're filming this in was it early February? So it's a very sexy time to be in Turks and Caicos instead of here in Ontario. So maybe tell me how you went down that journey.
Well, it was 2009 when I went down to Turks and Caicos for the first time. And if everyone recalls, we had the economy blow up in pretty much everywhere, the global financial meltdown. And I already had a trip booked down into Turks in the spring. I think this happened September 2008. And 2009, I was already going down to Turks. And I went down there, flew down, walked out into their 13-mile beach right in the middle, center ice, looked one way, looked the other way, and went, oh my God, like I just got to be here. And the aqua blue water, not a cloud in the sky, the beach sand was like talcum powder. and I just literally like that. Very few things in my life I've been pretty definitive on being an engineer. I like to weigh so many things, paralysis or analysis, I admit. But that one, I was like, oh man, I got to be here. So within I guess maybe within a year, I was down there 6-7 months at a time. And again, it was terrible timing on my part because of the global financial crisis. I couldn't get any leverage money down there. I couldn't get a lot of interest from people that were following me and investing with infill projects in Oakville. Just the appetite was pretty scary, as everyone can imagine or recall. And so anyhow, I kind of went out, tried to buy 2 hotel sites, and same thing. I couldn't get things done satisfactorily. And so I kind of abandoned those and just went and bought some land and sort of worked on that process. And, it's been there 10 years in the making. And then I've sold a parcel or 2 of the land over the years, and things like everyone expects, over time, it all appreciates. I'm not a genius. It was just appreciation, right? Over time. And now one of them, I want to retain and hold a beach property. Pardon me. Let me clarify that. It's Iron Shore. It's not beach. So it's on the opposite end of the island. To center ice, it's still a 5-minute car drive, which is not far by any imagination. And so basically build a villa and go vertical. So I've been sitting on this for years and years and years, and COVID hit, and looking for things to do. And it's kind of like you look at your own asset mix and go, let's do this thing. So that's where we are sort of today. I do have some drawings that have scaled up on the property, but we, over 10-year time, I kind of revisited that, and the market has changed. Back then, they didn't have Airbnb. Actually, that's not true. It was just starting back in 2010.
Okay.
All right, 10-ish from what I recall. And
whenever, I don't know.
you know what I mean? And
yeah.
And then similarly on the island, in order to rent a villa, they had 3 or 4 booking websites. So I was kind of turned off by the control around renting the villa. So I kind of held off on that. And now we've got Airbnb, we've had VRBO, these booking.coms, all these different booking engines whereby I don't feel I could get manipulated and outplayed. Of course, through SEO and things like that, you still can do it. But, I think I've got a fair shake now. Actually, it's a friend of mine that's been down there for 30 years.
Yeah.
That is sort of the host.
Yeah. When
people get off an airplane, he'll meet them, put them in the place. So he's going to be part of the design team to build out what is necessary to have an excellent experience for clients on the island, and specifically in the sun and all the things they're looking for. And as everyone can imagine, COVID only accelerated private villa market instead of being in a condo or a hotel. And so, it's no surprise to see that, their Turks and Caicos is no different than Canada. The prices are up, the construction's up, and they were unique in the Caribbean, where the British Overseas Territory got them the vaccines, first and second dose, 12 months ago. So Canada didn't even have a first dose 12 months ago, if I recall. And so what they felt in Turks and Caicos, the British Overseas Territory, felt the best thing to do is get everyone vaccinated, keep them safe, keep them working. Because the facts of life are, anywhere we are, the unemployed, they need to survive, and crime will increase. So it was a strategic move on Turk's case. And they kept the economy rolling. And when July, they opened the borders again.
Okay.
Everybody flooded in because their borders were open.
Everyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
whereas a lot of
the British there, right? So anytime people mention the British in any of those places, is that, because I know, like, for instance, if we wanted to, as Canadians, go get mortgages in, Great Britain, it's no problem, right? Because we're sort of on the same sort of thing. Is that the same sort of case down there for Turks and Caicos, or is it something different? When I started investing in the US, I did it by myself and had to go through the growing pains of doing that. GlennSutherland.com/coaching. A 12-week coaching program done 1 hour per week over Zoom from the comfort of your own home. Classes are kept to 5 people to be able to answer everyone's questions. Shortcut the process. Make fewer mistakes. Curriculum available at GlennSutherland.com/coaching.
It's exactly the same as the British rule. So
awesome.
we're very familiar with that. In that, I had looked at Mexico and other areas, but my personal preference was the British system, British rule, the Privy Council, all these types of things are, as an investor from Canada into that territory. And one of the major reasons I went down there is because the almighty US dollar. The Americans still are the most influential people around the globe when it comes to secondary properties and things. I don't have anything to back that up, of course, but on Turks, about 70% of the properties, 70% of the visitors are Americans. And when the Americans are doing well, the island does really well. And especially the stock market the last 2 years has done really well. Americans are spending in real property down there. And similarly, you can see that on their runway, they have a private runway facility. What do you call it? Private jets.
Yep.
And 10 years ago, when I was down there, there were small net jets, and I still was impressed, right? These small little planes flying in. This time when I go down there, they're all the big G3s. Yeah. And I'm just amazed at the Americans and the money that they spend on their toys and fly down. And they don't want to commingle with us common folk in the commercial airline division. So we don't even see them. So the likes of Bruce Willis and all them have now their own private FBO airport that they can fly in out of and not, not be harassed. And that's important for, I guess if you have that kind of money. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. So I don't know if because you're talking about raw land down there. Have you looked into like what the leverage rates are? What kind of interest rates? Like what are they? Do you know what that's when you get to that stage of putting the property and what that's even going to look like?
Yes and no. So the key thing is 3 Canadian banks are down here, okay. which is was appealing to me. RBC opened up here about 2008 when I first came down, 2009. Scotiabank is down here, okay. And so is CIBC. So those are the 3 lenders. They do have private lenders on island as well, right? As you would imagine. Yep. And on an interest rate basis, because these aren't directly reporting into Canada, they actually, most of them, I believe, report into the Bahamas, and Bahamas is a separate division in Canada. All the loans are still facilitated, underwritten out of Toronto, so that they still use all those resources, but they do work off of more of the LIBOR rate when it comes into the United States, Turks and Caicos. And generally speaking, the interest rates are higher. They're, I think, more typical of the United States, and that, 2 or 3 points higher, the 4 to 5 range down there because of the added risk. And then the other part of it being is their amortizations. The Canadian banks are a lot tighter on their amortizations. They don't like to see 25. They more like to use 15. Okay. So as a result, your principal payments are much higher. So
does that mean the property values are lower too, or how do they sort of fall in?
No, the property values are very significant down there. Like when you're talking beachfront, it's about 3 million plus an acre.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's it's a lot of cash in Turks and Caicos. Americans coming down with cash, buying their villas, anywhere from 5 million to 20 million plus, right? And so it's a big, big, big cash society. And I think a lot of it, there's a couple of trust fund companies down there. One I use more than others. And, there's a lot for Canadians that are interested in that own private businesses. There's ways to, legitimately use this as a tax strategy to go forward. Okay. So I'm very familiar with sort of that process down there. And they're run by Canadians as well. So that was sort of a comfort level with me, helping me out for the last 10 years. I still own real property, still own stuff down there. So it hasn't been stolen from me. You know what I mean? And truthfully, they report into their financial services commission as well.
Are you worried about them stealing it to you? Because I know if you're an American or Canadian went and bought in Cuba, they can take the property back. And
that's true.
I don't think you can even buy it there now anymore.
That's true. No, I'm not, truthfully, because of the British overseas territory. Gotcha. There may be some cause for concern if they go independent. Okay. Which is sort of a mandate of all British overseas occupied territories, Anguilla, there's a whole bunch of them, right? Even Cayman Islands, there is an ongoing trend by the IMF is that basically the British get out of them and make them all independent. And it brings up all kinds of issues, right? How do they police themselves? Worship, stuff like this. So there's a whole host of things, but the American embassy is down there. The Americans pay very close attention because there's so many American tourists and so much American money down there. So that is helpful. Canadians as well. Turks have had some troubles, but in the past 2009 and that, but truthfully, I've seen all this. It's no different than we have troubles at our border at the moment. And it's a bit daunting, but when I always felt comfortable owning real land and real property and real buildings and, I mean, that's, what can I say?
So you have a bunch of raw land down there, and you said you had some blueprints. Is it that you hit some snags? Is it difficult to get the permits to build? I've heard about like some other people I've interviewed from like distances of land. Does it get or like to the water and stuff? Is it overly difficult to build there, or are you seeing any roadblocks?
No roadblocks, pure cash. So where I'm at in my career is I like to build things in cash. And then when the assets stabilize, then I like to leverage the properties. So that is sort of the way my position where I've been with Turks the whole entire time. And that's kind of where to go vertical on the building, hard and soft costs, where, to certain, I say, call them founders, I'd like to identify some founders that would like to come in and partake in the actual villa design. I'm not saying, hey, guys, what do you need? I certainly know that, but I guess to be more enticing, if people wanted to get involved, they can partake and see how it is a villa is laid out in the islands. And, again, part of our team is I've got the mortgage company, I've got the trust company, I've got a 30-year veteran on the island, same age as me, went to my high school in Oakville, that's there, boots on the ground. I know there, I've spent a significant amount of time there, 3 or 4 years down there, in fact, 6-7 months at a time. And basically, understand the process, how to get stuff down there. The approval process is very easy. It's nothing like Canada, submit your drawings and go. It's not difficult at all. Everything's built out of block in Turks and Caicos and parged. So, and rebar, and very limited amount of wood is used there, and any kind of fit and finish is brought in out of Miami by container, which is problematic at the moment,
Yeah.
given, all of the issues with COVID. So I'm not suggesting to get in the ground right away because of inflated prices, but to do the drawings now,
Yeah.
take 6 months to get the drawings, and within 15 to 24 months, I like to see this thing vertical and operational. And basically you've got 52 weeks calendar of the year that is open for business. And
Yeah.
at the best you see, and what I've seen over a 10-year period, is anything more than 30 weeks a year that you expect to be occupied. You're a little bit dreamy on that side, but 30 weeks a year,
Yeah.
$1,500 a night is about a villa, about $10,000 a week, that these things command. So they're quite
Wow.
they're
Yes.
quite lucrative. US dollars, US cash in many cases. And then at Christmas time, you'll see ranging about $25,000 to $40,000 for Christmas week and New Year separate. So you can bring in a pretty big haul just those two dates.
So it doesn't sound like you're building a little shack either. What are you
No,
trying to build here?
I'm kind of being directed by, I work with Sotheby's, which is, as everybody knows, is massive when it comes to real estate around the globe. And they're sort of advising and directing in combination with the host, is saying, 4 bedrooms are great, but 5 is better. And if you can do 10, even better. But when you start getting into the 10 plus, that's a different snack bracket.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's appropriate for, say, my appetite for risk, and not necessary. And so about the 4 to 5 range. And as you can imagine, that square footage would vary whether it's 4 or 5. So I don't have bolted down the exact budget.
Yep.
And for construction. And then you need furniture.
Yeah.
And some landscaping out there. And so, there's a lot of opportunity, as I call it. There is some buy, renovate,
Yeah.
refinance on the back end,
Right.
and go repeat this process. And it can be on Turks, or it could be other islands as well. I'm quite familiar with Turks and comfortable with it. But I'm open. Once I do one, I'm not too concerned about. It's got to be centered around, like, how do you have proper deed and title? Like, that would be my criteria on where I would go, and make sure I don't lose the property through nationalism or something.
Yeah.
And the US traction, the US dollar down there, man, does it motivate a lot of people. So within the whole Caribbean, they use all kinds of currencies, but all the labor is attracted to Turks because they're paid in US dollars. So that is, is such a strong currency and strong attraction. And, Turks is only, truthfully, maybe the mid 90s is when it really started to evolve.
Okay.
And you didn't really hear about it until maybe 2009, maybe 10 years later, when things started going sideways. But everything down there is new. It looks like Miami South Beach. The restaurants are fantastic. Whereas, personally speaking, when I go to Bahamas and I go to the other older Caribbean islands that were built in the colonial style in the 60s and 70s, it doesn't really appeal to me. I'm more of a modernistic sort of guy, right? Clean lines. And, investors or Canadians and Americans will be very familiar with the style down there, not so much British colony anymore.
So I've never been to Turks and Caicos. So what language do they have, like a rainy season, like like if you go to Costa Rica or something where there's Is that why the 30-week thing you were talking about? Those are my two questions. Language, and is there like certain seasons like that? Because I've never been there. Sorry.
Yeah, it's so there is a rainy season, hurricane season. So hurricane season is effectively June 1 until I think November 1. So it's quite a long hurricane season. Really, when the waters get warm enough to actually start seeing the hurricanes come across is typically into September. So you'll see things shut down the month of September for repairs and maintenance, and primarily because tourism dies off in the anticipation of a hurricane. So all these buildings are built the Canadian standards. There's an architect out of Oakville down there that brought down sort of Canadian standards, Canadian engineering, Canadian safety, and they've over-engineered these buildings to withstand, these 100-mile winds, et cetera. I think the standard's even 200 mile to take a 2x4 on end to fly into the side of a block wall, which is full of rebar.
Yeah.
Like you won't see stucco down there because you'd have all these boulders sticking in the side of the stucco, right? So
yeah.
So
I think insurance is going to be nuts too with if you have all these hurricanes, right? You're going to be doing repairs every.
That's correct. Insurance is higher down there for sure. Yeah, but on a revenue basis, there's significant revenue in these properties. Depending where you are, probably 150 US a year to maybe some of them are running 300,000 US a year in revenue. And part and parcel of back in the old day, 50% of revenue would go to your booking agent and somebody that would meet and greet at the hotel / property manager, right? So in sort of where I'm addressing this now is a fellow Canadian buddy of mine down there for 30 years is saying, hey, look, I'll do this for about 25%. So, that it's, managing the property that is, and making sure it's maintained and used. And you do want to use these things because pipes, when they're not used, are all PVC, the glue dries out. You need to use these properties, and similarly, all the waste from the, human waste, it all goes through a septic system and then it's used to water all the plants. So if you don't use them, then the plants all die. So it's kind of these are living cycles, these villas, and you want to keep them busy. And that's where, as investors, as founders, if you will, people that have an interest in this, those 20 some odd weeks that can't be used, maybe there might be 4 hurricane related, right? Or 5, but the balance, it's the barter system. Use it or barter your weeks away. And so it's a form of return. So not everything, Glenn, is pure return on investment. That's tangible. Some of it's intangible by way of use. And if you put it in the neighborhood of $10,000 a week to use it, or trade it for dollars in a sense, right? But that's where sort of founders will come into this level. And depending on the amount of debt that we leverage on the property responsibly, means we would open up the calendar more. So if we took on tons of debt, we would need the full calendar to earn revenue to pay for all this debt. If we just take on modest debt, we can earmark less weeks to pay for the debt and use it. And generally speaking, I'm thinking more of a 4 to 5 year hold. Yeah. This is private equity at its purest. There really is no exit, with the except like a redemption. We're in this together for 4 or 5 years. An equity takeout can be done through a mortgage.
Yep.
Again, those are some of the players that I'd like to attract as well, or mortgageable. So I've paid for all the land. So I've done a big contribution myself. So, and then, from an operational perspective, I would oversee it. make sure everything's booked, running, operating, property management. If you want to look at more of an asset management process, and yeah, so
that sounds awesome. It sounds so warm.
yeah, no, it
A little
does.
expensive, but it sounds really warm.
Yeah, no,
Beautiful, right?
it is expensive, but you know, where I kind of see things is like it back to sort of Olympia Trust, in that a lot of clients in around Hamilton, I speak to a lot of people around there, they've made a tremendous amount of money on when they bought their asset to where the prices are today. They're hitting $1 million for these duplexes in Hamilton now, and abroad, not just Hamilton, just one segment. And, there's a lot of property owners are sitting there in debt equity, if you want to call it. And combine that with Olympia Trust clients with RSP money sitting there, same thing, and they want to do self-directed. So you kind of could maybe marry up Olympia Trust with property owners that want to expand that debt equity and come down into the Turks and Caicos and bring with cash. Pardon me, and come down there. And the company that I work with, the trust company, is the way we've notionally set this up. It's not formal yet, is that the funds remain with the trust company until the work is completed on the property. Because again, I don't want to get into an issue of where funds are missing or whatever. So the trust company receives all of this money. They sit on it in trust. They're registered with the Turks and Caicos Financial, Financial Services Commission. And then an appraiser comes to the property, like in construction in Ontario. They quantify what has been, work is in place, and then they advance money based on work and in place. So that's how, it protects everybody's interest, not money just go missing out of thin air for no reason and nothing was done. And so that practice I used very closely when I was building in around Oakville, single family homes that were $4 million, or we were doing infill projects at 20 townhouses. So the same things apply, using trust companies, Olympia Trust, and down in Turks and Caicos, another trust company on island, and papering that all up. So there you go. So
it's exciting. It's interesting to think about. And it has, like you just talking about Olympia Trust, that's kind of exciting because they won't lend in the US, but because of the British thing, you get into some other things that I never even really thought about, but that's very exciting.
That's why I kind of put that teaser out there. So again, I've got real property as well in Hamilton. I've got the same scenario. I got a lot of debt equity. I can refinance, truthfully. Yes, I can. But I'm painting a picture for some property owners that are out there that maybe are maxed out on leverage with, Schedule A banks. They can always access Olympia Trust investors, and investors listening to this from TFSAs and RSPs. You can leverage against these properties, secure them up to 100% loan to value. And in conjunction with that property owner, come down to Turks and be a part of all this using registered funds, and keep your cash for deals in Canada. And I never like to influence people with too much of their cash. It's more how to use these registered funds and RSPs, and use Canadian real estate, and take it abroad, if you will, and the security being back in here. And similarly, securities, there's still a corporation that's held with all these assets that, there'll be shares issued accordingly, and people be on title. And like I say, my motivation is to see these things up and running and get going, and stop me, even including in Hamilton. I kind of stopped doing things in the last 3 months or so. The prices are so high. So and try this Airbnb and the Burr strategy, and US dollars. Go USA.
Robert, if people wanted to get a hold of you, track you down, get some more information, how do they do that?
Probably the best way is by email.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And reach out that way. And my email is robertblake100@hotmail.com. And, I can fill you in on what's going on, and we can talk one-on-one. And, I think you can appreciate this, Glenn. I just want people to understand who I am and who they are and make sure there's a match.
Yep.
And people that are aligned for seeing this thing through and seeing for what it's worth. It's not pure return. It's a big return in terms you don't have to write a check for a vacation. So it's a little bit different.
I'm personally used to it too. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Airbnb side is exciting as well. And partnering up with somebody that's more familiar with it than I am. But notionally, it's not difficult to conceive, right? Yeah. Well,
cool. Thank you for coming on the show, Robert. I really appreciate it. I think there was a lot of interesting stuff there.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. And anybody interested, just reach out and we can see how we marry up together.
Perfect. Thanks again.